if you have people taking a bunch of different substances, how the hell do you figure out what is helping and what is hurting an athlete's health?
He ended up doping so much that it made him significantly slower in the water. Like, he was huge. He looked like He-Man. The dude was an ocean liner when he should have been a speedboat, basically. The vibes were this is probably a little harsh, but they felt very cursed to me. They neglected to put a roof over the whole thing. So the sun's beating down. There's like old ladies like having wheelchairs requested. And it feels sort of like wellness-y Coachella.
It feels like the enhanced games are kind of this collision between two forces, the removal of friction from life, but also kind of the machine of marketing, big money, trying to sell us something. Like, this is all kind of one big advertisement.
The friction of our lives is where we grow. It's where we develop as people. You can see how you get from NAD to let me hammer my face to make my bones grow sharper like clavicula.
Welcome to 2%. I'm your host, Michael Easter. Here's an insane idea. What if we took a bunch of athletes, we juiced them to the gills with performance-enhancing drugs, and then we had them all compete? Now, this might sound like something someone comes up with in their dorm room while stoned, but it actually just happened at the Enhanced Games, which were held in Las Vegas in May. So today we have Gayomali and Sam Eagan. They were on the ground before, during, and after the Enhanced Games. They were talking to founders, athletes, and scientists. They were there reporting their podcast, Superhuman. And they're here today to talk to us about the aftermath of the games and the rise of websites selling us TRT, peptides, and other products that promise us better versions of ourselves with no effort, just the swipe of a credit card. Let's get into it. All right, Chris and Sam, thanks for coming on 2%.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Really appreciate it.
So you guys are about to release the final 2 episodes of your show on the Enhanced Games. They might be out by the time this episode is out. But for people who have no clue what the hell the Enhanced Games are, explain it to us.
Yeah, so the Enhanced Games were originally billed as the sort of Steroid Olympics, which, is kind of the kind of idea that like stoned college students tend to have. Or like, wouldn't it be sick if we like had all these like PEDs and people could do whatever they want? But they actually made it happen. It was founded by this guy named Aaron D'Souza, who is an associate of Peter Thiel's, who is most famous for helping bring down the Gawker website from many, many years ago. Yeah. And we've just been embedded in this strange world where they convinced a bunch of former Olympians to take some PEDs and try to break some world records. That's basically what this thing is.
I was actually going to say some people who aren't even Olympians, like they I think obviously because this was so controversial, they kind of had to widen their search, and they got some people who had never competed in the Olympics, but not to get ahead of myself, but actually ended up like beating former Olympians.
Yeah. So with the word controversy, so when I first heard word of this, and I don't know when it was, probably a few months ago, you hear Steroid Olympics, you hear like Saudi money, you hear we're juicing people to gills, and my initial thing was like, this just sounds like a giant grift. Like, this sounds insane. What is this? What did you find in terms of that? So what was your mindset entering doing this podcast, and like, where has it gone since then? And am I wrong? Am I wrong that this is kind of insane?
No, when I went in, I kind of didn't know what to expect. It just sounded so circusy and like a big old sort of carnival sort of thing that I was like, dude, this could end up being a fire fest. This could end up being something stranger altogether. But as we've been sort of embedded in this thing this whole time, I kind of realized it's basically just, the website Hims with a WWE component attached to it as the marketing apparatus, basically.
Yeah, and so people who don't know Hims sells basically supplements, peptides, TRT.
Yeah. I would say for me, I came on a little bit earlier to the project than Chris. I went to their initial event where they announced that this was actually going to happen at Resorts World in Vegas. Like, this would have been May of 25. And it took me about, I don't know what this says about me, but it took me about a full day of like attending these events and talking to people to be like, hey, I think that they're trying to sell testosterone to the wider public. This is an ad. Like, this is an ad for testosterone. It took me a full day to realize it. And I would say throughout the whole process of making this series that that suspicion was only confirmed.
Yeah. So tell me what the business model is, because when I first heard this, I was like, oh, they want to see like what people can do if they're juiced to the gills. Kind of interesting. To your point, Chris, kind of sounds like something you'd come up with in your dorm room, stoned. But there's a bigger play here because they are paying these athletes insane money. So then the question is, well, where's the money coming from, and how are they actually going to make money? So tell us about that.
It's the enhanced games are funded, at least at the start. Now it's a publicly traded company by Christian Angermeyer, who is this sort of biopharma billionaire who's played in the psychedelic space for some time. And the business model, like we said, the way they kind of pitch it is that it is more bespoke version of telehealth that will give you access to both drugs that need to be prescribed, like testosterone, and also just a wider range of supplements. I think they sell like a sleep supplement for Chris. I think you said it was like $70. But on top of that, they're selling testosterone. They sell a whole list of peptides. They sell NAD. And Chris actually went through the website and bought it. I have not done that yet. But as they pitched it, it was like, you're going to have to talk to a doctor, and it's going to be more specifically suited to like what we think that you need. But as I understand it, that has not been the case. It basically is just essentially the same website model as Hims or Row or Keeps or any of these other companies.
So when you bought stuff, Chris, so the idea going in is you're going to meet with the doctor. It's going to feel like just getting a prescription from a doctor, but that didn't happen. So what was that process like?
Yeah, it was basically like filling out a Google Docs survey of like, what are you suffering from right now? And I was like, anxiety. And it's like, great, prescription on the way. I actually ordered some Semarelin that in true enhanced fashion hasn't gone to me yet because of some logistical holdups in their shipping pipeline. But, as soon as it gets to me, I'm eager to try it. But basically the business model is they're using this, this wacky sort of competition to sort of justify a framework that then they can like use to sort of normalize PED use. And that's kind of like the big overarching mission of this thing. Like if we can provide a way where we can sort of do it, in their words, like safely and like rather conservatively, honestly, like in the public eye, then we could sell that to the masses. And that's sort of how they're billing this whole operation. Yeah.
So Chris, your background is you were at GQ reporting on wellness quite a bit. Sam, you're a producer, you were a D1 athlete. You wrestled at Wyoming, is that right?
That's correct. Go Pokes.
There you go. So how did you two get pulled into this project?
I think for me, there's just, there's not a lot of people who come from like an athletic background of the level that I guess I come from. That also work in the journalism space. So I think that it was a natural fit. But I was also really curious. From my own experience, I was fascinated by the idea of I guess just like the recovery part of PEDs. Because I just remember competing at Wyoming, and I think people understand in theory the training regimen of like a Division I athlete or an Olympic level athlete, but like to see it actually put in front of your face and to actually do it is another thing entirely. It's you're like an hour and a half in the morning, anywhere from 3.5 hours at night. You're told when to go to class. You're told when to go to study hall. You have to go to recovery after practice, probably have tutors after that. So your entire day is built for you. 5 hours of exercise, 6 days a week if you're not traveling. And even at like 19 to 23, my body was messed up all the time. I still have I got pinkies that do crazy stuff. I was beat up. And the question of like, does this have to be this way? Like, are we kind of closing ourselves off to a realm of drugs and pharmacology that could like make athletes' lives better without compromising their safety and health? I was really interested to find that out. I don't know if I think that the answers were satisfying, but I wanted to see what they were selling,
Yeah, you're going, look, like I've been put through hell on the wrestling team. It's taken a toll on my body. If there's this thing I could do that is not going to affect my long-term health, that seems like it would be interesting from an athletic perspective, just to make the lives of athletes not quite so hellish.
Totally. And I think just because people don't realize how stringent the anti-doping sort of guidelines are on substances that you can and cannot take. This was something that came up like time and time again with the athletes we were interviewing. One of the athletes, Megan Romano, who came out of retirement after like 10 years, a swimmer. She was like, I was afraid to take ibuprofen because you never know what's going to be tainted. You never know what's going to get you banned. Like the list changes constantly. The book of like WADA guidelines is like a tome of different substances that you can and cannot take. It changes. Yeah. It changes constantly. And it was also just created without athlete input. So for me, I was just really interested in how this could affect the athlete experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you kind of mentioned who is behind this, but how did this whole idea start to get legs of the enhanced games?
Yeah, so Aaron D'Souza sort of like was kicking around a bunch of ideas post his Gawker project a couple of years ago. And he presented this sort of idea to Peter Thiel, who's one of his buddies, and was like, hey, what if we threw a sort of steroid Olympics that, sort of allowed us to put on this big show. We'll create a lot of noise. It'll cause a lot of mischief. And from there, we can sort of develop and reverse engineer a sort of business plan. So I think they kind of went in with the big, nasty sort of like, dirt kicking idea. And then they sort of like, we're building the plane on the way down to mix every metaphor possible to describe this. But
yeah. So in a way, yes, it does have elements of this is an idea that you'd come up with in the dorm room while stoned. At the same time, it's coming from two people that have billions of dollars and they're like, hey, we could actually figure this thing out. And then they also have the sort of gear in their mind going, all right, and then how do we turn this into a super profitable business potentially?
Yeah, and so that's sort of how I came onto it too, because Aaron and Christian Angermeyer went on Joe Rogan's podcast like not too long ago. I think it was like was it 2022 or 2023?
I believe it was 24.
24. Yeah. So they went on and, when I was at GQ, like sort of my big story that I wrote over there was the story about the guys who got their legs artificially lengthened during COVID secretly. And so for me, I was like, I kind of want my next big story to be about weird stuff we do to our bodies, the ways we can augment it and sort of improve it. I'm using air quotes here, but improve our bodies. And when I heard them on Rogan, they were like carnival barkers, basically. They were kind of like, this is going to change everything. This is going to like, usher in a new paradigm for enhancement and the future of humanity. And then when I actually wrote them and like, kind of pitched myself to be the guy to write a big magazine story on it, it was kind of like, oh, this is just like another business. And so there was like this like incongruity between what they were actually pitching and what the actual project turned out to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very much an extension of Peter Thiel's transhumanist vision. For those who might not know, transhumanism is an ideology that has existed in the tech space for a long time that basically says that like to avoid the inevitable collapse of humanity, like that we must enhance and depending on who you ask, even like sort of supersede our own bodies, whether that is like uploading yourself to the cloud or reverse aging yourself with like, I think of Brian Johnson using the blood of his son, it's part of this transhumanist ideology, this transhumanist vision that Peter Thiel very much subscribes to.
Part of the argument that they're making is that doping is already happening in the Olympics and sports. So I heard one of the numbers that one of the founders tossed out. They said 44% of Olympians admitted to PEDs in the last year. Did you report on that? Is that real?
Yeah, so that is a study that is it's a real study. It is an outlier among other sort of studies that have been done on the rates of doping in the Olympics. And the researcher that did it consistently has sort of outliers in his data. It's anywhere from like 10 to 20% higher than most other studies find. 20% of athletes in the Olympics doing drugs is still a significant. I wouldn't say that that's nothing, but it is an outlier in the data for sure.
So they pulled the most favorable number because they're going, well, if 40%...
No one would ever do that in the wellness space, Mike. Come on, man.
Yeah. So they're basically saying, all right, if 44% of Olympians are already doping, like that makes an unfair playing field. at the real Olympics. So what if we just, pull back the curtain and say, hey, basically, more or less, anything goes. Let's see what happens. That's kind of their argument.
Yeah. And then, it kind of has a little bit of a point. Like, it's like you look at the Russian Federation or like the Chinese, so it's like, oh, these big apparatuses are basically like helping their athletes gain an unfair advantage. And then what are they getting from, the IOC or WADA? It's like basically like a slap on the wrist. Like, they're still competing. They're still able to win medals. Sometimes it feels like a little silly. So I kind of see their point in some of this.
Yeah, and there is some research that suggests even if you've used certain banned substances in the past, those can still impact your performance moving forward. So you'll still have, you'll have gained more muscle than you could have without them. Well, that muscle's going to stick around. Even if you're not on them, you're still getting this sort of boost from the past, more or less.
Yeah. And, there was this really funny example of this Australian swimmer named James Magnuson. He was the first dude who signed on with Enhanced a couple of years ago. And he actually ended up taking, they didn't have a protocol in place. They didn't know what they were doing. He was kind of effectively, the trial balloon set free into the air. And he ended up doping so much that it made him significantly slower in the water. He was huge. He looked like... I don't know, like He-Man, basically, like the cartoon version of He-Man, which, maybe having giant shoulders isn't the best for your buoyancy in the water, but, the dude was a ocean liner when he should have been a speedboat, basically.
I mean, I'm not convinced that wasn't a problem at the broader games themselves a few months ago, too. Like having more muscle on your body does not necessarily equate to like swimming faster in the water.
Right.
You are basically turning yourself into a rock. You're far less buoyant. It makes it a lot harder.
Totally.
So I did find myself wondering why they chose swimming, given the reality of the way that the water works. But
yeah, because a lot of the drugs they are offering and athletes are using are essentially muscle enhancers. Are they using stuff like EPO because most of the sports are power sports, right? So like the swimming is short distances. There's sprinting, but they're not doing like marathons or anything like that.
No, they've been very we don't want to do anything that is an endurance sport because it's not TikTokable, basically. They want everything to be able to, they're very candid about that. They want to be able to throw it on a clip, publish it, put it out there, get as many views as they can, which you could tell this was their model by being at the games we were kind of the press being, we were sequestered into this kind of corner of the arena and given very, very limited access to interview the athletes during the games themselves. And meanwhile, they were letting YouTube, I don't even know who they were, sort of YouTube influencers, Zoomer, TikTok influencers, go poolside, and they were doing Fortnite emote dances and interviewing athletes right as they came out of the water. So it very much felt like they were trying to cater specifically to new age media.
Yeah. And these short bursts, sprint sports and lifting, it's it makes a lot of sense for the online economy, but for a 6 to 8 hour live event, maybe not the best or most entertaining way to throw first games, I guess.
So you guys go to Vegas. It's at the event is held at Resorts World, which is a big newish casino at the end of the strip. It's very nice. What are the vibes like before the event actually happens?
So they had sort of built this bespoke structure in the middle of Resorts World, it had a four-lane pool, 100-yard track, I think, or maybe a little bit longer than that, and then a little stage for powerlifting. There was a big DJ booth, and this was all taking place in sort of the shadow of Trump Tower with the sphere in the background. The vibes were a little, I don't know, this is probably a little harsh, but they felt very cursed to me. What
do you mean by that?
The swirl of the TikTokers, and then there were the athlete families sort of in the stands. They neglected to put a roof over the whole thing,
Jesus.
Which, if you're competing in weightlifting or track and you're in the middle of the Nevada desert, that's probably not the best situation to break a world record in. So the sun's beating down. There's old ladies getting having wheelchairs requested. And it feels sort of it feels like a sort of wellnessy Coachella in some ways, but they hadn't figured out all the kinks yet. And sort of that's kind of like how it is when we like parachuted into this thing.
It was 96 degrees that day.
Yeah, because it's May, it's late May in Vegas.
Yeah. And it was, I don't know if you remember what I said to you, Chris, beforehand, but I was like, I spent my entire life going to wrestling tournaments where you compete for 7 minutes at a time. Mm-hmm. Nobody here is going to be accustomed to how much of this is just waiting for your turn. And they're kind of rolling through the events really slowly. And a lot of it is, I would say probably 4 hours of it. Don't quote me on that, but like a significant chunk of the time was dedicated to Olympic weightlifting because that just takes time. People need to rest between reps. No shade to Olympic weightlifting. I think it's really cool, but it is not the best spectator sport, I think. Right. It happens, like a handful of seconds you're competing at a time, a ton of buildup. And I think they only attempted one world record the whole time. They didn't even, in the weightlifting, they didn't even attempt, they didn't throw the weight on the bar and give it a go with almost any of their athletes. And this is the height of the day. So for most of the weightlifting, the crowd was like empty downstairs, drinking free beer that they've been given by Enhanced. Because it was for, no public tickets. It was invite only. Everybody in attendance was either press, family, or an influencer.
And so the deal for athletes is explain how they get paid and what the numbers are and how that compares to doing it the quote unquote non-enhanced way you're trying to get to the Olympics. And
yeah. So, the sort of like pattern that emerged for us was if you're like not an NBA player or an NFL player or whatever, you're basically not making any money from your chosen sport. And so for a lot of these, let's take swimmers, for example, like their options after they're retired from their swimming career are basically, they could teach kids, they could do seminars, but maybe you're not the type of person who wants to help kids kick around in the pool or whatever. And so if you're signing on with Enhance, you get paid a monthly stipend. We don't have the exact numbers on that because they decline to share it. You have basic healthcare, you have the futuristic healthcare with all the, enhancements and sort of like health monitoring and recovery stuff. And you had free housing and food. So you basically had a lot of your amenities taken care of, and you could basically focus on training and training only, which, it's kind of like just like a luxurious version of going back to college, and except you don't have to go to class, basically, is kind of how I understood it.
We should add, though, that they were only given those amenities if you agreed to be, well, not all of it. They were only given the food and board and access to the pharmaceuticals if they agreed to go to the United Arab Emirates and participate in this study that they're doing on the drugs themselves. Okay. So you had to essentially agree to be a guinea pig to get not the stipend, but the board and the food and free access to the pharmaceuticals.
And then one of the big reasons that athletes would do this is that if you win an event, the purse is pretty big. And then if you break a world record at the games, it's even bigger. So what are the numbers there?
Yeah, winners were getting, in most of the events, we're getting $250,000. Okay. Which is, if you're running track, that's more than you might make in your entire career. Mm-hmm. With the exception of the best of the best of the best of the best.
Yeah, and then low end was $50,000. So there was a range of money you were guaranteed to make from just competing alone, basically.
And then for some of the events, I believe the 100-meter sprint for men's and the 50-meter and 100-meter free in swimming, if you broke a record, you got $1 million. The purse was the world record-breaking purse was less than that for other events, but for those ones, it was up to $1 million.
Yeah, and I think just to put a pin in that so people have context, if you play in the NFL, you're probably guaranteed at least $2 million a year. You play a few years, you're like, okay, I'm probably going to be okay for life so long as I just manage my money decently. Now, if you're at a decent level, you can be in the 9-figure range. So some of these bigger professional sports, you can do your thing, you'll make enough money that you're probably set for life. But with more of these niche Olympic sports, you're really scratching by unless you're the absolute top, like a Michael Phelps, and you can get these big advertising deals and all these other things. But the average athlete is hardly making any money.
Yeah, that's basically it. And we talked to a number of the athletes, and they all had their reasons for doing it. Like, some of them had just put down a mortgage and then lost a bunch of their other sponsors. So this was like a way to, like earn a living, basically. One of the more interesting guys, his name is Andrei Govorov. He had actually fled Ukraine during the war, and his business back there was basically destroyed. He had no source of
Like literally
income.
destroyed, to be clear,
Yeah.
like with missiles. Yeah.
Yeah. And he, he was like, in order to compete at an elite level that I want to compete at, it costs, $10,000 a month, like between the coaches I got to pay, the trainers, my recovery, my food, all that stuff. So he was like, Enhance was just financially, the most logical move that I can make in order to like be who I want to be.
Yeah. Okay. So at this point, we've got this big event. We're going to let people juice to the gills. We're going to see what happens. Do they get these crazy times and weights lifted we've never seen before? We've set down that this is sort of one big advertisement in order to sell these things to the public. We've set up the fact that athletes are being pulled into this because they can make more money than they might have made their entire career for this. Now the event happens. What happens with the times? Are these records being shattered across the board?
No. They go most of the entire day without a record. They come close once in the 100-meter men's sprint. They were like hundredths of a second off. But in most of the events, the one that comes to mind is kind of being the most egregious with the women's 100-meter sprint. I believe that I don't believe any of the times that were run would have qualified for the Olympics.
Would have qualified
for the Olympics. Yeah, even the winner, I believe. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. They were all in like the 11-second range, which is certainly faster than you or I, but not an Olympic caliber. And not only that, they had multiple non-enhanced athletes. So for context, you could join the enhanced games and say, I don't want to do steroids. I just want to compete for the money. And they had multiple athletes who were doing that, or at least said they were doing that, won their events. One of them was Hunter Armstrong, who the guy that was trying to save his mortgage, basically, who signed up for the games. He won the 100-meter backstroke. Yeah, he won the 100-meter backstroke. As well as the Fred Curley, the 100-meter sprinter, and the women's sprinter as well, whose name is escaping me.
So basically, one, the times are not crazy. The weights lifted are not crazy. And people are winning who are not even enhanced. And this is supposed to be, let's see what happens when we enhance the hell out of these athletes. And
yeah, and I don't know about you, Sam, but you could sort of like feel the tension, like sort of like building in the arena as the night goes on. It's like, oh, another one that's not smashed, another one that didn't even come close, another lift that was like far off from a world record. And it wasn't until the very last race, which was the 50-meter free, and they actually had maybe, pound for pound, the highest caliber of athletes competing in that one. So that was kind of like their big bet. And it wasn't until that very last end of the night that the swimmer, Christian Golomev, like touches the wall. And then like there's a split second that happens in between that where they like verify that a world record was broken. And then all the screens like flash red. It's like, they had all these like, I don't know if it was fireworks, but just like all this stuff firing off that they were sitting on all night. And you could just sort of feel like, I was looking at the executives, like it was like a load had lifted off their shoulders. Like they were so relieved to finally have had a chance to like break one single world record with the games.
He did that in some sort of suit that's banned in the normal Olympics, right?
Mm-hmm. He did it in what's called the super suit, which is just like really, it looks like a wrestling singlet, but even kind of tighter, like somewhere between a wrestling singlet and a wetsuit. But it goes to the ankle and comes kind of over your body. And what it does, it kind of compresses you and makes you more buoyant. Which I do think when they first initially broke a record, and for context, they as kind of a proof of concept, a year ago, they had Christian Golomev break the 50-meter world record as it stood at that point, which had been set by Cesar Cielo in the late 2000s in a supersuit before the supersuit was banned.
Okay.
A few months after that, Cameron McAvoy, an Australian swimmer, broke the the world record that the rest of the world recognized and Christian Golomy's world record in a regular sort of Speedo, not in a super suit. So did not have the like extra gear that Christian Golomy again raced in and broke the record in. So that honestly, to me, that puts more of an asterisk on the record than the steroids do. The line that I always say to people is like, I use the Barry Bonds example, which is obviously extreme. You know, like you could go on YouTube right now and watch, there's hundreds of videos on YouTube just analyzing Barry Bonds' swing. It's the most beautiful swing ever, right?
Yeah.
Steroids aren't going to make the technique of your swing better. You know, they're going to make you stronger, make you recover better, but they're not going to make you better at swinging a bat. But then like it's the super suit is almost like benching in like a sleeve.
Right.
The powerlifters do versus benching raw without, you know, like you're adding a gear to a thing to assist you. At that point, if you want to go down the philosophical route, it's like, why not put a fan behind him and like have it propel him forward? Why not give him flippers? Why not, you know, what is the logical end of what you're doing? I think here was kind of my question.
So these events start happening. No records are getting broken initially. And then you finally have this moment where, you know, screen flashes red. At that point, what's the energy among people who are not the owners? You said it's almost like they felt relief, but what are people in the press area thinking and saying? What's the reaction from the TikTokers and the YouTubers? Is it sort of like this, I don't know if this is going well, or at that point when that happens, are people reacting as if it's a success?
I think the TikTokers didn't really care.
Yeah.
Either way, the families were happy. The athletes were ecstatic. I mean, these people have been living together for many months, you know, in hotels in Abu Dhabi, most of them. Like they're very like, kind of tight knit. So they were ecstatic for. They were ecstatic throughout for whoever won, for whoever, you know, the energy for them was kind of always very high. The press was clearly, I think, quite suspicious of the premise. What I've been kind of saying is like, I don't know what this says about me as a journalist, but I was like, you know, if they had broken a ton of records, that would have been like an incredible story, just in terms of it being interesting, not good or bad, just really interesting. If they had broken no records at all, that would have been so interesting. But breaking one in the event that we thought they might break it in, that they'd already broken it in at one point, we thought they might break it again with this suit on at the very end. I was like, this is, I don't want to say a letdown, but it wasn't as compelling as I think that it could have been. It was hard for the story part of my brain to not be like, dang. You know, I think a lot of the press felt similarly. I don't know about you, Chris.
Yeah, you know, when you asked about what was the mood between the influencers, it actually took me a second because by then most of them had already left.
Exactly.
So the stands were a little bit empty by that point, which was probably not in their favor. But I do think for me at least, like I gained a lot of sympathy for these athletes over the months, just like the stuff that they struggle with, like the work they put in, how unique their situation was in terms of like being the best at what you do and being asked to train together in like the same pool every day. Like that was really fascinating. Like the dynamic in there was a bunch of alphas in the same room. You look to your left, it's like the second best guy. You look to your right, it's the third best guy. And they kind of like pushes you to be better in a lot of ways that, how much that had to do with their success versus PEDs, I don't really know, but I thought it was like a really like sort of cute like dynamic.
Yeah, the athletes are the people throughout this process that I have absolutely the most sympathy for, the ones that I would say I'm the happiest for. Like it is, I would say my criticism of the enhanced games in no way should be construed as being support for the IOC or for the World Anti-Doping Agency. Something that I thought was quite poetic in the days immediately after the enhanced games. I don't think they could have timed this worse. Kirsty Coventry, who's the president of the IOC, was interviewed. And she said, in effect, she said, I don't believe in paying athletes, like prize money was kind of the argument. She was asked about paying prize money to Olympic athletes. She was like, I don't believe in that. I think that's a bad thing. Which is just, you know, the IOC makes tens of billions of dollars. They have plenty of money. It's technically a nonprofit. You know, I think that they can afford to pay life-changing money to some of their athletes. On top of that, I think that the methods that we use to decide who's doping and who isn't. Our sort of anti-doping policies as they exist are draconian. Athletes have to surrender to tests at basically any given moment, any given time. Their whereabouts have to be given to the World Anti-Doping Agency literally 24/7.
Yeah.
If you miss a test, I think 3 times, then you get a year or 2-year ban if you're just not where you're supposed to be. They have no sort of say on what is and isn't banned. It is also draconian, I think, kind of also dystopian in a way, almost opposite the spectrum of the enhanced games.
Yeah.
And I have to think that there's a better option.
Some sort of middle ground. So the event happens, as you said, kind of a letdown, although you said you wouldn't want to call it a letdown, but we'll just go with that.
You can call it a letdown. I think that's fair. I stand by that. It's a letdown. Yeah.
Event was a letdown. Stock price crashes like 75% in the ensuing days. It could just be my algorithm, but I did not see a positive thing. I just saw a ton of hate being thrown at this thing. What reactions did you see, and how do you sort of process that?
I think our algorithms are probably coded very similarly. Like it was maybe 99% people dunking on the whole thing. But at the same time, I feel like this whole thing was designed to sort of court controversy and to I feel like for them, they feel like any attention is good attention. And so just the fact that people were talking about it and they had a lot of eyeballs and people were going to their website, like I think they would consider that a win. And, they were, in the aftermath, they were trying to spin this as, hey, look, we had a bunch of athletes who happened to be 35 who set PRs, and that's a moral victory for us and for them. And, maybe that can happen to you too. You could be the best version of yourself and feel 10 years younger. And so that was kind of the spin they were putting on the ball in the aftermath of the games, which I thought was, not the worst idea. But for me, the thing that was like very weird about the games is if you are targeting a demo that is like people who are like 35, 40, middle-aged, and you're like trying to help them feel younger, inviting a bunch of 18-year-old TikTokers who've never felt lower back pain in their life just feels like the most twisted marketing strategy possible. So that was the part I couldn't quite reconcile.
Yeah, so that's the promise, is that, you two could set a PR at 35, 40. What drugs do they actually sell to people? So there's like this range, right? There's peptides, there's testosterone, there's what all is being sold, and what do they do?
Well, it's changing constantly because the Trump administration is constantly deregulating a lot of the stuff that they want to sell, like the peptide stuff.
Oh, interesting.
I can tell you right now for sure they sell salmonellin, which is a peptide that is supposed to boost your natural production of growth hormone. They sell testosterone. They sell NAD+.
What does that do?
Yeah, NAD+ is this sort of coenzyme that helps with sort of like cellular repair and helps a lot with energy, brain fog, that sort of thing. I've dabbled in it and take it once in a while before I got into the like enhanced world. They sell a bunch of like GLP-1s, creams, and then like they have like your standard issue like creatine and like pre-workout sort of stuff that are grossly overpriced and actually are a little too sweet for my liking after tasting them.
It would appear that they've added Cialis to Dalafil since I last looked, maybe a week or two ago, which I believe some people are saying is like you can use as like a mental clarity booster now too. I've heard that on the kind of wellness circuit. So they have Cialis, they have generic Cialis, they have tirzepatide, they have GHKCU, the copper peptide, creatine. They kind of got everything in this whole gambit of drugs.
And then how are they tracking the health effects of these? Because part of it is they're doing these sort of study on athlete health to see, do these things help or harm in the long run? What does that actually look like? And have they published any results yet?
No results. They've throughout the whole process of reporting this, they were very. At first, they kind of promised us, especially Chris, that we would have access to whatever information we wanted about what they were taking.
Yeah.
And then when kind of push came to shove, and we were like, hey, we're going to go to Abu Dhabi, and like we want to be in the room when you give them the needle. They're like, no, actually, we can't tell you because of privacy laws in the UAE. And so we don't know exactly what any given athlete was taking. They have since published some data on what percentage of substances like different athletes took. Like it was like something like 70% used testosterone, like 40% used EPO. Just kind of generic, like this percentage of our athletes use these drugs.
Yeah.
But they have not made the exact results public yet. And we talked to a bunch of doctors to basically gut check what this study was. And there's a few big problems. One is that like you really don't have any control. You have 3 athletes who are not taking drugs, and you're not controlling anything else in their life. So that already kind of compromises the study. And then 2, like they're not drug. They were very candid that they were not drug testing athletes in the lead up to the games. They were only going to test their sort of organ health and to make sure that they were healthy to compete.
Yeah.
Some of these substances can enlarge your heart, they can cause liver damage, et cetera, et cetera. And kind of the hole in that logic that we kept coming across was there's a huge financial incentive here. And you've already said you're not drug testing any of these athletes. So what's stopping anybody here from taking more of this drug, given that they could win $1 million,
right.
From on the side getting some testosterone there's nothing stopping them. So the on top of that, there's questions of, independence, like how independent could this study actually be? The data I think is compelling but dubious. Like I think there isn't a ton of research out there because we have been so, I think, punitive in our approach to drug research for a long time. Not especially with street drugs, but with steroids have been treated as a street drug for a long time. It's very hard to research the effects of them. We didn't really have many of these drugs. We still don't have a really good idea of what they do.
Yeah.
Most of it is like bro science, and then on top of that, bro science being just kind of anecdotal. Like, I like this. Do you like that? How do you use it? Blah blah blah.
They had a couple different categories of drugs. It was they had they had the testosterones. They had stimulants that they were able to take. For the women, they had hormone regulators, and then what was the last category, Sam? There was one more.
Metabolic modulators.
Metabolic modulators, yes.
Like meldonium, drugs that make your cells more energy efficient. Often they're used for like diabetes and liver disease and stuff.
Yeah, and what was interesting is, we talked to this guy, Guido Pielis. He's this cardiologist from the UK who heads up their sort of like, scare quotes, independent medical commission. And he said that peptides were actually like something that the athletes weren't going to be able to take. In the lead up to it, like we talked to a couple of them who were excited about potentially taking, like BPC 157 or, the Wolverine stack for healing and all of that. And he was like, that stuff is a little too unregulated even for us. So we don't want to dive into that, which to me felt weird because it's like, oh, you guys are leaving a lot of money on the table by doing this. But at the same time, it's like your sort of, I don't know, ability to regulate, or not regulate, but to sort of like determine what the athletes can and can't take. It's just as squishy as, say, WADA, it was, they kind of didn't have their own grounding to, that's how I understood it.
Well, what I was going to say earlier was, on top of how hard these drugs have been able to research, the other argument they make, which has some merit, I think, to be fair, is that like most of what we understand of the symptoms of steroid abuse comes from people who are abusing extreme amounts of them in an unregulated manner, off-label for long periods of time, i.e. bodybuilders, basically. And their argument is, although we can't know because they don't give us access to what they're doing, is that they're giving these athletes very small doses of these drugs, relatively speaking, for much shorter periods of time. I think in total they dub for about 8 weeks, maybe slightly longer.
Okay.
Yeah. And what's funny, what's interesting about that too is like, the power lifters, it's like, oh, they were the ones who were the furthest away from breaking world records. So in some ways, was there more conservative dosing that Enhance was providing them different from what was available in other contexts? Which
I think was unsurprising, and just because weightlifting has always been, I think, the most drugged out of the Olympic sports.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like in powerlifting, you have federations that are clean in theory, and then you have ones where it's like, this is a non-clean federation. Like, just juice yourself to. I mean, there's already kind of this experiment happening in the powerlifting world. One thing I would point out about the studies, though, is if you have people taking a bunch of different substances, how the hell do you figure out what is helping and what is hurting an athlete's health? Like, there's just way too much fucking noise.
It's a strange cocktail. And also, like, how do you extrapolate the effects of testosterone from Ben Proud, Olympic silver medalist, to 60-year-old Ethel who wants to, like, this is an example that they're like, if we want Olympic athletes to have access to it, and the 60-year-old woman who wants to tend her garden longer. How do you extrapolate the results from an Olympic silver medalist to a 60-year-old woman who just wants to take care of her peonies, you know? Like, it's...
And I think we mentioned it earlier too, that it's like, you know, the menu of drugs that are presented to each athlete is totally different for each one of them. Like it's totally bespoke, like catered to sort of your biometrics, your test, and it's recommended to you by your doctor. You decide what you actually do and don't want to take. And so just like the variance there alone between the athletes is like, it's like just like such a wide spectrum that how do you control for that?
Right. So what I thought was interesting, Chris, is that you would take an NAD.
Mm-hmm.
What prompted you to do that, and what was that like?
Yeah. So one of the funny things that happened in like Sam and I like getting put together for this story is we both do Muay Thai and both compete, you know, so, you know, obviously when we were in Vegas, we're like, let's hit up a Muay Thai gym. Let's like get some work in, you know, like,
Awesome.
But, you know, I'm 41. I'm like, at sort of like the tail end of like my, you know, ability to compete at this point. I also have a 4-year-old son. And so my sleep is trash. Like, you know, I don't get very much recovery in. And a homegirl of mine was like, she was in her mid 40s and she was like, I started taking NAD and it really, really helped me with like my daily brain fog and just my general ability to function. And as a writer and sort of someone who partakes in like combat sports, I was like, oh, the sort of mental acuity that comes with NAD plus is something that was really appealing to me. And I also wanted to understand what it's like to jab a needle into your belly so I could sympathize with these athletes a little bit more. And that was kind of like what kickstarted the experiment for me.
What was it like? Did it improve things? Did it work?
Yeah, you know what? Sam actually tried it too when I had an extra dosing that was sent to me. For me, I think it's awesome. Like, I feel like whenever I do need my brain fog lifted or I need a little bit more energy, it helps tremendously. I'm also a lot older than Sam. So this stuff like my, you know, he has the wrestling background and a lifetime of those injuries compounded onto him. But, you know, I got like 10 years at least. So, you know, maybe the age is more of a factor for me.
Yeah, it is, and I would specify, you know, or preface that, you know, I am not 40. Yeah, I'm 30 years old. Maybe in 10 years I'll be like, yeah, give me everything. I don't know.
Yeah.
But one thing I liked about working with Chris on this it was a good gut check because I grew up. My mother's a doctor. I grew up in a house with a medical professional, so I am deeply suspicious of anything that comes out of the wellness industry. Mm-hmm. Most of it's unregulated, kind of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I just have this kind of like predisposed belief from my experience competing that like I've seen what people can do if they just train really hard and sleep a lot and eat really well. And that's kind of all that they do. And that's their focus. I'm like, maybe we as a society should try to sleep a lot more and work out. If you want to run faster, lift more, work out really consistently for many hours a day, and sleep well and eat better before we start talking about injecting exogenous substances and hormones into our body. I was like, I feel like we're starting at the wrong end here often, because there's something to sell. So I came into it, I think, pretty suspicious. I took a pretty small dose of the NAD. I didn't really feel much. I found the feeling of it being in my stomach to be so off-putting. It's like warm and it feels like there's like a little it felt like one of those like little like weights that you see the like in like the old ladies in the jazzercise classes, the like little bullet weights they hold.
Yeah.
I felt like someone had like slipped that under my skin and it was just sitting there. But again, you know, I don't know how I'll feel when I'm 40. You know, it's easy for me. Like I can still go out on the weekends and wake up and I went out. I was out real late a couple nights ago watching the game 2 of the Knicks and partied until like 2 a.m. And then I woke up. I was like, I got to get rid of this hangover, and my solution was to run 5 miles.
So sweat it out.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, you know, I know sleep is important, but there's a Knicks game that starts at 8:30.
I know, yeah. And I don't have a kid, so it's like, and it's easier for me to say, like, maybe you should work out 4 hours a day before you start putting stuff in your body.
I wonder, and Chris, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on this. Part of me wonders, is having brain fog, waking up kind of tired, is that just part of aging? And is there almost a reward in that? It's like it's a fundamental part of the process of being human. So if I think about myself from a writing perspective, it's like some mornings, I wake up, I'm like, the sentences aren't coming out, but I put the work in. And then I get a couple good ones and I'm like, that was awesome. And I did that sort of by myself. Do we lose something when we buy a product that makes these important things about being a human easier?
That's a good question. You know, to my mind, it's sort of indistinguishable from, you know, having 2 shots of espresso in the morning in some ways. It's like if it helps you do your job a little bit better, I'm like, yeah, dude, go for it. That's fine. Like, we're sort of like thrust into this system where getting sleep is pretty much impossible. And like if you are in a situation where you can get a lot of sleep, it's kind of like, that's like the new luxury in some ways. Like if you're LeBron getting 12 hours of sleep a night, it's like, of course, you're going to have an advantage over everyone else. But none of us, if we're working our jobs, trying to get in our workouts, trying to like do any extracurriculars, it's like, yeah, sleep is always the first thing to go. And so, you know, whatever you can do to sort of mitigate that, I'm personally kind of all for it.
Yeah. Sam, what was your take on that, given your background as an athlete? And you had to go through all these, you know, PED checks and everything. And where do you draw the line? Because I think Chris's point is great. That's like, well, if I took 4 shots of espresso in the morning, that gives me some sort of boost. And so like, how do we even determine these lines between what's a quote unquote banned substance versus, oh, that's good, that's totally fine?
It's a really hard question to answer. It's just kind of thinking out loud. Like especially as I have the experience of getting older to me, and I would preface that I have in 10 years, I might be like, screw everything that I said when I was 30. I'm like, Chris, give me the shot. Totally possible. But right now, I would never preach this to anybody because it's not my body. And I really do believe that. Like the autonomy is important. But I do think that you lose something of your, the process of aging, I think, is such an important part of our humanity. I think feeling what Enhanced is selling is, I think, what so many in the sort of tech biopharma space are selling, which is like wherever possible, removing the friction of your lives. And I think that the friction of our lives is where we grow. It's where we develop as people. It's where if you're a father, it's where I think that we imbue valuable life lessons upon our children. And I don't want to do things that make me feel good all the time, personally. Like I intellectually, I enjoy writing. The process of writing, I find to be really unpleasant.
It sucks.
Yeah,
it's the worst.
I do it because I don't like it, and it makes me anxious, and it makes me feel kind of insecure about how smart I am, and it makes me like all these kinds of things in a very similar way that like combat sports did. They're very primal and personal, and if you lose, it's not like in football or soccer where you have a team to blame. It's like you got beat up in this very visceral, personal way that's embarrassing, and that's hard, and it gives you insecurity, and it gives you anxiety, and I worry. I guess I worry. NAD is one thing, but I just worry about the logic, where that logic ends. And I like, it doesn't end like this with everybody, but you can see how you get from NAD to let me hammer my face to make my bones grow sharper, like clavicular, you can see how that kind of rabbit hole can happen. And most people are going to be like Chris and be reasonable about it, but there's always the outliers that are going to, take things to extremes. And I think because of the internet, like taking things to extreme is rewarded because of the culture of the internet, you know? So I just kind of worry where this goes. And for me, like I've found a lot of enjoyment in the aging of my body in the way that I practice combat sports, like the way that when I wrestle now, I'm not as quick as I once was. My knees hurt. It's hard for me to take shots the way that I used to. Like I don't want to do a full penetration step where I hit my knees. So I take like old man shots and grab people's legs. But also like I wrestle college guys and high school guys now, and I'm like, I can see 5 moves ahead of you. I know what you're doing. Like I've studied the scrolls too, young man. You know, and there's fun in that too. And I worry about losing that the more that this culture kind of propagates. I really do.
It feels like the enhanced games are kind of this collision between two forces that you just mentioned: the removal of friction from life, but also kind of the machine of marketing, big money, trying to sell us something. Like this is all kind of one big advertisement for the removal of friction. It's just this collision of those two forces in modern life.
Yeah, I feel like that's the read. It's funny because it like greases the skids in some ways to like introduce weirder frictions into your life. It's like, I'm going to take the easy way out, but now I'm going to go spend 3 hours in the gym. You know what I mean?
There you go. That's a good point.
Yeah.
It is a good point. Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, just as I've gotten into, I've been getting into running, and I'm not like, I'm 6'1", 260. I'm not naturally predisposed to being
but
like
it's not a runner's build. No.
I'm just barely under a 23-minute 5K. I'm working my way up. At that build, I'll take it. But now I get running culture stuff peppered at me on my like short form video feeds, like TikTok and Instagram. And it is like all sports are consumerist, but running seems to be an extremely consumerist sort of sub-athletic culture. It's like you can buy your $30 gels, and you can buy your like, you know, your fancy sunglasses and your $500 shoes and this and that. And I see people out running in Brooklyn all the time, and they're wearing like all these crazy dry fit gear and Oakleys and super expensive shoes. And I'm running on like a gigantic old Wyoming shirt and like crappy trail shoes. And I don't feel better than, well, actually, I definitely don't feel better than them, because like I went out and bought an actual pair of like $200 running shoes like recently, and I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like there's utility to these. I understand that, but it's like been such a good case study for me in how far consumerism can kind of take these things, you know. And it's not necessary all the time. It is, I think, to me, in some ways counter to what athletics is, and yeah, I struggle with it.
Yeah, well, you know, the $250 Gentle Glide racing shoes are kind of the testosterone for your feet. So,
the super suit of the feet, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, we had Brady Homer, who's a 2:25 marathoner.
Oh, Jesus.
That's psycho.
Wow.
And he said, but he did say that the super shoes probably give him a 6% decrease in his time. So we're talking going from like 2:30 down to 2:25 or something like that.
Wow.
I mean, more. And it's just in the shoes. It's really interesting. So where do you think the enhanced games go from here?
Shortly after the games, you know, they kind of doubled down the stakes. They were like, oh, Usain, if someone could beat Usain Bolt's old record, we're going to not do $1 million prize. It's going to be a $10 million prize now. So in some ways, I kind of feel like, you know, this sort of first iteration of the games was designed to attract other athletes who are probably higher caliber, who, you know, have a little bit more of a reputation to be like, yeah, I could win that easy money. I could win $250,000, like beating some scrubs. And I thought what was really telling about it is afterwards, Ryan Lochte, you know, he was kind of like, oh, I kind of wish I competed. Like, that sounds like something I would do. And so it's like, oh, if you're going to get people who are on that level, like sort of, you know, voicing interest and perhaps even doing it, like, I think that's going to be a lot more interesting and kind of fun to see.
Do you think that legitimizes it, or it becomes an like even more spectacular spectacle?
So for me, like my two big questions about the future of this are, I guess one thing I would preface is that like Billionaires funding their like quirky sporting events is not new. I think about Trump and the New Jersey Generals, you know, like,
Totally.
Or the XFL and Vince McMahon. What I would say, like, I think one of the big points to that point is one of the big questions to that point is how long will Christian Angermeyer and company continue to want to hemorrhage money engaging in this operation? Because they're going to have to keep paying athletes a ton of money to do this. And they need the business to work. And it's hard for me to understand how Enhanced stands out from Keeps or Hims or Row or et cetera, et cetera. But then also, I think the big question, I think this is maybe the most important thing for the future of the Enhanced Games, is the case study of Hunter Armstrong, the backstroker who competed unenhanced. So he, throughout the process, was like, I still want to compete in the Olympics. I just desperately need money, and the Olympics are a scam, and they don't pay you. And so I am going to do this, and I want WADA, please keep testing me. I will be, I'm just going to do this competition and then come back. It is currently unclear if they're going to let him compete in the Olympics and the World Championships and whatever moving forward. They did happen to test him directly after he competed at the Enhanced Games. They pulled him aside and tested him, which is funny. But the question of whether or not he's going to get banned, I think, is important, because if he's not, then that opens the door, I think, to tons of other athletes who still want to stay in the Olympic system coming over and competing. And that's how you're going to get the kind of athletes who could break world records, who are 25, 26, 27, And I think that if that happens, if he's allowed to compete, then I could see the floodgates opening. And then the question just is, like, how long does Enhanced want to hemorrhage money paying these athletes? Because it cannot be profitable. There's no way.
Right.
Yeah.
If everyone breaking the records is not actually using the substances you're selling, there's no incentive to the consumer to go buy the substances. And then where does the money come from?
Yeah, it's a big problem.
But then you're left with, like, teachers versus the JV team day.
Yeah. All right. Well, the podcast is Superhuman. It's awesome. Really great on the ground reporting. I love what you did with the episodes. I especially liked episode 3. That was one that I immediately sent to my producer, Robbie. I was like, listen to this. This is great.
Shout out Lena Masitsis, our senior producer, incredible sound designer. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great work, guys. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks
so much, Michael. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having us.
Thanks for checking out the show. And thanks to Chris and Sam for coming on to talk about the Enhanced Games and their podcast, Superhuman. As a reminder, 2% is in your feed twice a week, so please subscribe so you get those updates. We are always open to your questions for our Ask Michael Anything section. Send them to media@twopct.com or drop them in the comments. If you want to watch this on video, the free iHeart app allows you to do just that. Give it a download, watch us on video. And as always, have fun, don't die.